Um, I don't want to say very much because we've got a very long agenda and Peter's covered most of the critical stuff. Three things. One, uh, there's a sort of battle being fought across the country to shape or reshape the health and care provision in the country. And everybody's been putting their sixpennyworth in to a white paper and to draft legislation, with the one comfort that they're getting on with it. The discomfort is that not all the things that have been incorporated in the planning are compatible with each other. And therefore there's some sorting out still going to have to happen. But it is crucial, isn't it, that the sense of freedom to change the way we do things for the better, particularly place-based freedom, is not lost in this process. And there are enough people who are absolutely charged up with that as a mission, I think, for us to be confident. But there are so many powers that be, whether it's the Treasury or the Department or NHS centrally or local authorities, and somehow out of all those interests, not to mention GPs and the voluntary sector, and ways in which providers can collaborate over a larger footprint. There's so much going on, but there is still sustained this feeling that now is the time for changing things for the better and in a much more collaborative way. So I don't want to say any more than that because it is still confused, but the next month or two will show some clarity as to how it will shape up. So no more on that. Quick word about our erstwhile Director of Nursing, Maria Nelligan, who I discovered in the Fleetwood Gazette, which appeared on my desk this morning, has got the Chief Nursing Officer's Award for her work, which is a very highly prestigious award. So well done to Maria. The last thing I was going to mention was that ever since I joined the Trust, the charitable side of what we do has not really been prominent, partly for many years because it was shared with another trust in the area, but that's gone now, and we're in charge of our own destiny, and we've got a much revitalized approach to charitable funds and activities, and that's so powerful because small amounts of money can add to the empowerment of staff at all levels, and we've captured that now, and we're going to move forward quickly with it. So watch this space. That's really good news. And perhaps I should have started with this right at the beginning of today's event, but it is absolutely right that I wish a very happy Eid Mubarak to all our service users, to colleagues and friends celebrating Eid today, and for our colleagues and friends in hard-hit India tomorrow. But that's great. Let's celebrate as much as we possibly can in the relative freedoms that are emerging in this country, at least. Thank you very much. We've got one more thing on this bit of the agenda before we have a quick break, and that's the questions from the public, which we've got a couple. Joe, are you putting them on the screen? Can you do that?
Doing that now. So, oops, Daisy, beg your pardon. Can we see that yet, or is that not shared yet?
Not quite.
Okay, hang on. Sorry, beg your pardon. Just Does that come up now?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. The first question is really,
Okay.
thank you, even better. It is specifically about autism and ADHD and the ability to get a dual diagnosis. And this is, in a sense, against a backdrop of an NHS which can be criticised at times for putting things into compartments and having specialisms which deal with specific illnesses or unhealthy situations. And that is obviously needing to change at a time when particularly older people have on average got 2 or 3 or 4 so-called comorbidities. But this is specifically about mental health. And can it be difficult at times to get more than one assessment on more than one aspect of mental health? Jonathan, could you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, David. No problem in me providing an answer to this. So I've actually reached out and contacted the parent and carer who submitted this to offer a further conversation with them directly and with the team to understand the personal circumstances and why this query may have arisen, and if it's something that they've experienced. And the reason for that is so it's not trust policy that people need to choose between an ASD and an ADHD assessment. And the 2 referrals, if a child or young person needed such assessments, 2 referrals will be generated. One for ADHD would go to our core CAMS service, and we do of course have a specific ASD assessment service that would provide that assessment and that access. Assessments would take place for both, and it's quite often or plausible that children would have both diagnoses and relevant treatment prescribed, certainly in the case of ADHD. There are some rare times, I'm told, where if someone is diagnosed with ADHD and they are started on medication, we may ask for a delay between assessments to allow the medication to work before assessing for ASD. And this would be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And I can obviously confirm that there are many children and young people on caseloads and receiving support from our services who have a diagnosis of both ADHD and ASD. So we really must stress that it's not a case for parents to have to choose between assessments. And if that has arisen with anyone, then we would welcome them contacting our services so that we can speak to them and make sure that the pathway has gone as it should have done.
Okay, thank you. Joan, did you want to say something, and then Bookie?
Yes, thank you, David. It was just really a quick question. I'm just conscious, it kind of came to my attention when Cheryl Gillam died fairly recently, and she was the MP who got the Autism Private Members Bill through Parliament. And I think subsequent to that, there was kind of guidance given out to the public sector in terms of how we can be savvy about how we deal with autism. And I just wondered, really arising from this question, what the perceptions are about how we deal with autism, and I'd just be interested to know how we apply that guidance amongst our own staff, how we actually raise awareness about autism, because it is actually very misunderstood. There's not as much awareness perhaps as there could be about autism. So I think it's very, very valuable question actually that we've got, and might help us shine a little bit more light on how we actually approach autism and perceptions of it as well. Thank you.
Rather than put that straight back to Jonathan, shall we move on to Bookie, who would you like to say?
Yeah, I was just going to confirm that clinically it wouldn't make sense for us to separate the pathways, and the assurance that Jonathan's given, it would be how we would practice clinically. And Joan's question certainly kind of relates to my answer, which is absolutely it's key, and one area of importance that the Royal College and nationally have continued to raise awareness around autism. And we have a strategy which has been jointly developed with service users with this point in mind, because it is something that is misunderstood. Indeed, the importance came out in the consultation for the recent white paper on the Mental Health Act, just so that nationally everyone's aware about the need to not just spotlight autism, but to ensure that there are protection for people with autism, that they receive the right treatment, the diagnosis and treatment that they deserve.
Okay, thank you, Bookie. I think we could move on to the second question now. Is that okay, Joe? I'm not going to read out these questions because that's why we got them on the line. But essentially, this is about long COVID and whether there is a response to that in terms of community clinics in our area. Jonathan, I think this is for you as well.
It is indeed, David, it is, and I've looked into this following receipt of the question. So to answer the question, the answer is absolutely yes. There is a Staffordshire-wide post-COVID MDT clinic, and that includes a range of professions which range from OT, respiratory, psychology, and to soon include also GP representation directly in those clinics, and that pathway has been built in collaboration with our trust, Midlands Partnership Trust, and UH&M over the past few months, and funding has been secured for that ongoing support. Advice and information is available for patients who continue to experience difficulties after being diagnosed with COVID-19. There's actually a dedicated NHS website which is called yourcovidrecovery.nhs.uk that service users can access in order to find support. However, there is a pathway being built, and that support to the long COVID or post-COVID MDT clinic will be via GPs in future. So patients who are identified as potentially needing specialist physical or psychological support due to symptoms can access that advice and the service. And as I say, the first point of call for any service users should be via their GP, who will screen, triage and direct patients to the right element of the MDT as required.
That's great, thanks. And it's also great that there's equal emphasis on physical and mental consequences. Tony, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just a question, really. Who is responsible for that pathway, and who will be responsible for the sort of ongoing changes necessary to that pathway? Is it the acute sector?
I don't believe it is, actually, Tony. The honest answer is I don't know who's directly responsible for the whole pathway. It has been set up in collaboration between different partners who have different professions in the community. But we are receiving allocations of funding directly to each individual trust, depending on our input at the moment into those. And Matt Johnson's been leading on it from our perspective. I can certainly go away and ask that question if needed, but we have had a letter recently confirming that the funding will come down, and it does cover the costs that we've identified for this year.
I was just thinking of the clinical aspect of it. You know, somebody has to be responsible for the pathway. It's not an issue with funding, it's the actual clinical pathway.
Yeah, I can find out and get back to you, Tony, the clinical governance arrangements around the pathway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then Bookie.
I was only going to offer my understanding to Tony's question, which is the CCG hold the overall governance, and the GPs, which is, although coming later on, are being seen as holding the clinical governance for that process. But so far it had been led by the acute trust, but I guess since that group has been developed, like Jonathan said, the multidisciplinary team, the CCG are now bringing primary care to hold the overall clinical governance.
Okay, thank you. I think we've reached the break point within 2 minutes of targeted time, which is quite remarkable. So can we have a 10-12 minute break and be back at about, well, not later than 11:25. I hope you've got quick boiling kettles. I'll see you shortly. Okay, thank you.